You know, if we view a forest from afar, what we see initially is a sea of green, a uniform blanket of shape and color. But as we move closer or zoom in, what we find is a huge variety of both shape and form in leaves. And it's quite fascinating to look at all of the variation that we see. So we'll talk about that a little bit today. In Kentucky, we can break down the types of leaves that we have in the state into two main groups based on whether or not that tree maintains its leaves through the winter. We have deciduous trees, and those are the ones that drop their leaves in the late fall. And then we have evergreen trees, and those are the ones that have the majority of their leaves persist through the winter. Now, with deciduous leaves, we can break those down based on their form. So what we have two main categories. We have simple leaves, and those are kind of what they sound like. They are a simple blade of a leaf that's attached with a short stalk known as a petiole to the actual branch of the tree. Now, simple leaves can have themselves some variation. They can have any number of types of teeth around the edges, or they can be smooth, and they can be divided as lobed as well. So a lobed leaf, rather than being the oval or spoon shape that we're familiar with, will have a number of indentations around the edges that don't go all the way to the middle of the leaf. And we have two main kinds of lobed leaves. So the first kind that I'll talk about is if you think of a maple leaf. And a maple leaf is what's called palmately lobed. Now, the word palmate means resembling a hand. So if you look at a picture of a maple leaf, you can kind of see a resemblance to a hand there. The other kind of lobe leaf that we see is a pinnately lobed leaf. And the word pinnate refers to something that resembles a bird feather. And if you look at this southern oak right here, you can kind of see a vague resemblance to a feather with the midrib down the center of the leaf, and then the sides which come in towards the middle and almost look feather-like. So those are the two main types of simple leaves. Then we also have what are called compound leaves. Now, a compound leaf, if you didn't know any different, and I know at one point I didn't, if you looked at a compound leaf, you would actually think that each one of these green blades is actually a leaf of its own. But actually, these are what are referred to as leaflets. The actual leaf is the entire arrangement of all of those leaflets. So in this black walnut, all of these leaflets are actually comprising the leaf. And do you remember that word palmate and pinnate? We also use those two words to describe certain types of compound leaves. So if you look at this, and this is a buckeye, which we have native to Kentucky, this is a palmately compound leaf. So all of the leaves branch out from a central location, and once again we see that hand-like resemblance there. But then if we refer back to the black walnut, that is what's referred to as a pinnately compound leaf. Once again, we see that somewhat feather-like look with the leaf. But in Kentucky, it's not just deciduous leaves that we have. Like I mentioned, we have evergreen. And then evergreen trees in Kentucky, the majority of them would be classified as conifers. Conifer being a plant that bears its seed and spreads its seed through cones, similar to pine cones, rather than by way of flowers. So if you think of these, we think of pine trees and spruce trees and hemlocks. And within these conifers, we break those down kind of as either being needle-like in appearance, so like the pine trees, and they can be borne singly or in tufts of multiple needles. Or we can even have evergreen conifers that have scale-like coverings on their needles. So think of arborvitae and cedar, and they have the scale-like covering on it. Now, because nature is never straightforward, not all evergreen trees in Kentucky happen to be conifers. We do have a number of trees, such as most of the species of holly and mountain laurel, and these are evergreen trees, but their leaves look more like deciduous leaves in that they're broad and flat. But actually, even though they superficially resemble deciduous leaves, they have the same characteristics that the evergreen conifers do as well. They have thick, waxy coverings. They're much stiffer than a deciduous leaf. And this is all for a reason. Because when we look at the shape and the form of a leaf, they always assume a certain shape based on the environment in which they live. That is always informed by where that plant grows. See, in the wintertime, in temperate climates such as ours, the growing season is not really great. It's not a good time for photosynthesis. And the most effective way to deal with a lack of sun and warmth is to just drop all of your leaves and regrow them in the spring, which is what our deciduous trees do. As a result of them doing this, when their leaves grow back year after year, they tend to be thinner to reduce the cost of regrowing them to the tree. But as a result of being thinner, they also perform the chemical part of photosynthesis much better because they have a thinner membrane. As a result of being thinner, we do see breakdown between the veins that causes the lobing as well. So the lobing is a direct result of the leaves being thinner. But going back to the evergreen trees, that thick waxy covering they have and the much stiffer rigid leaf structure allows them to survive in much harsher conditions, including winters and much windier and drier areas, because they don't lose as much moisture from evaporation from exposure to wind. So we look at two different groups of trees who have responded to their environment in two different ways. They found the same solution in two different forms. So next time you're out in the woods, or maybe you're walking down a path and you notice that sea of green, maybe take a moment to walk closer and appreciate the variation in form that we have with our trees in Kentucky.